blue lights hit your rearview mirror. Not a quick flash, not a maybe. That unmistakable red and blue strobe that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. You instinctively ease off the gas. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel. You check your speed, your mirrors, your surroundings. And then it hits you. Why me? You pull over, engine still running, heart beating just a little faster than normal. The officer steps out of their vehicle, adjusts their belt, and starts walking toward you with a calm, controlled pace that somehow feels more intimidating than if they were rushing. And right there, in those few seconds before they reach your window, you are already making decisions that could affect everything that happens next. Have you ever been pulled over and felt unsure about what you were legally required to say or do, and whether you accidentally made things worse? If you have, I want you to share that experience in the comments, because what most drivers think they know about traffic stops is either incomplete or flat out wrong. And there's something very specific, something simple but powerful, that you should say before you even think about stepping out of your car. Most people never hear this, and it changes how the entire interaction unfolds. Let's walk through this the way it actually happens in real life, not the way people imagine it, not the way it's shown in movies, but the way it plays out on the side of the road. You're sitting in your car. The officer approaches your window. Maybe they tap lightly on the glass. Maybe they just stand there waiting for you to roll it down. You lower it a few inches or all the way. This is already your first decision point. And yes, it matters. Good morning. Do you know why I pulled you over? That question sounds casual, almost polite. But it's not just conversation, it's strategic. Officers are trained to ask this early because they're not just looking for information, they're looking for admission, tone, hesitation, body language. They're measuring you. And here's where most drivers make mistake number one. They answer the question directly. Was I speeding? I think I might have been going a little fast. I didn't realize the limit changed. What they don't realize is that these statements can be used as admissions. Even uncertainty can work against you. That, I think, or maybe, might feel harmless, but legally, it starts building a narrative, and you're helping construct it. Now pause for a second. Because what happens next is where things start to escalate in subtle ways most people don't notice. The officer asks for your license, registration, and proof of insurance. You reach for your wallet, your glove compartment, maybe you fumble a little. That's normal. But from the officer's perspective, they're watching closely. Are your hands steady? Are you overly nervous? Are you reaching too fast? Are you avoiding eye contact? Are you talking too much? Everything is being observed. Not just what you say, but how you exist in that moment. And then comes another question. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Now think about this carefully. These questions are not directly related to a traffic violation. They are investigative. They're designed to extend the interaction, to see if your story changes, to look for inconsistencies. And here's where tension builds. Because if you answer casually, the conversation continues. If you hesitate, suspicion may increase. If you refuse, the tone can shift. This is the psychological balancing act of a traffic stop, and most drivers don't even realize they're in it. Now let's talk about the moment that really matters, the one most people mishandle. The officer says, "Step out of the vehicle." Your instinct might be to comply immediately. After all, you don't want to seem uncooperative. You don't want to escalate things. And yes, in many cases, officers do have legal authority to order you out of the vehicle during a lawful stop. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Just because you must comply does not mean you should stay silent about your rights. This is where those critical words come in. Not aggressive, not confrontational, but clear, controlled, and intentional. Before you open that door, before your foot touches the pavement, you say something like this. I will comply, but I do not consent to any searches, and I choose to remain silent. That single statement does multiple things at once. It shows you are not resisting. It asserts your rights clearly. It limits your exposure moving forward. And most importantly, it sets the tone that you understand the boundaries of the interaction. Notice the phrasing. You're not arguing. You're not refusing the order to exit. You're not escalating. You're simply drawing a legal line. Now imagine two different drivers in this same moment. Driver A steps out quickly, says nothing, answers every question, and tries to be helpful. Driver B steps out calmly and says, I will comply, but I do not consent to any searches, and I choose to remain silent. Same situation, same officer, completely different legal posture. And officers notice that difference immediately. Now let's get into something even deeper, the way officers interpret silence. There's a myth that staying silent makes you look guilty. You've probably heard it. Maybe you even believe it. But in reality, invoking your right to remain silent is not evidence of guilt. It's a constitutional protection. The problem is not silence itself, it's inconsistent silence. If you talk a lot at first, then suddenly stop, that shift can raise suspicion. But if you calmly and clearly invoke your right early, it becomes part of the structure of the interaction. Consistency matters more than anything. Now here's where things get uncomfortable. Some officers won't accept your silence easily. They may repeat questions. They may rephrase them. They may act casual, like they're just making conversation. So you're not going to tell me where you're coming from? Why are you being so difficult? If you've got nothing to hide, why not just answer? This is pressure, not necessarily illegal, but very real. And this is where many drivers break. They start talking again, they try to explain, they try to clear things up. But every new sentence creates new variables, and once words are out, you can't take them back. Now let's talk about another scenario that catches people off guard. The officer takes your documents and walks back to their patrol car. 5 minutes pass, then 10. You start wondering, what's happening? Are they running your license? Are they checking for warrants? Are they waiting for backup? Here's what most people don't realize. Time during a traffic stop is not unlimited. Officers are allowed to take the time reasonably necessary to handle the purpose of the stop, but extending it unnecessarily, especially to investigate unrelated matters, can raise legal questions. But here's the catch. If you've been talking, answering questions, engaging in conversation, you may have unintentionally extended that timeline yourself. Silence, when used correctly, can actually limit how long the stop reasonably lasts. Now imagine the officer returns and says, "Mind if I take a quick look in your vehicle?" This is one of the most important moments in the entire stop, because consent changes everything. If you say yes, even casually, even without thinking, you've just given them legal permission to search areas they might not have been able to access otherwise. And once that consent is given, it's incredibly difficult to undo. That's why the wording you used earlier matters so much. I do not consent to any searches. You've already established your position. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You simply maintain consistency. Now let's address something that makes people uncomfortable. What if the officer searches anyway? This happens, and when it does, your job is not to physically resist. That will almost always make the situation worse. Your protection is not on the roadside, it's in what you said, how you behaved, and how clearly you asserted your rights. Because later, if the legality of that search is challenged, everything comes down to what happened in those moments. What did you say? What did you consent to? What did you refuse? Now let's go back to something subtle but critical: tone. Two drivers can say the exact same words and get completely different reactions. "I do not consent to any searches," said calmly, is very different from saying it with attitude, sarcasm, or hostility. Officers are human. They react to tone, posture, eye contact, and perceived threat levels. If you sound confrontational, even legally correct statements can escalate the situation. This is not about being submissive, it's about being controlled. Controlled voice, controlled movements, controlled responses. Because control is what keeps the situation predictable. Now consider a passenger in the vehicle. Officers may ask them questions too. "Do you know where you guys are coming from? Whose vehicle is this? Do you have anything illegal on you? Passengers often feel less pressure, but they can still influence the outcome. If the driver is silent but the passenger starts talking freely, that information becomes part of the interaction. That's why awareness matters, not just for you, but for everyone in the car. Now here's something most people never think about. The officer's initial reason for stopping you might be minor. A broken tail light, rolling slightly through a stop sign, a momentary speed increase. But the stop doesn't stay limited to that reason unless you keep it there. Every extra question, every voluntary statement, every unnecessary explanation expands the scope. And sometimes what started as a simple warning turns into something much more serious, not because of the violation, but because of what happened after the stop began. That's the part people don't expect. Now let me give you a realistic moment that happens more often than you think. The officer pauses, looks at you, slight shift in tone. Just be honest with me. Is there anything in the vehicle I should know about? This is a psychological pivot point. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like an opportunity to come clean. But it's also a fishing question. And again, the safest path is consistency. You've already said you choose to remain silent. You've already said you do not consent to searches. You don't need to fill the silence. Because silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It's discipline. And discipline is what protects you in these situations. Now here's the reality most people don't want to hear. There is no magic phrase that guarantees a perfect outcome. You can do everything right and still have a difficult interaction. You can be calm, respectful, legally correct, and still be asked to step out, still be delayed, still be questioned. But what you're doing is controlling your exposure. You're reducing risk. You're limiting what can be used against you. You're creating a clear record of your intent and your rights. And that matters far more than trying to win the interaction on the roadside. Because the roadside is not where disputes are resolved, it's where they begin. And the way you handle those first few minutes can shape everything that follows, legally, practically, and sometimes even emotionally. So the next time those blue lights appear behind you, remember this. It's not just about pulling over safely. It's about what you say, what you don't say. And the moment you choose to draw that line, calmly, clearly, and without hesitation,